And good afternoon, everybody. This is Doug Marola at thefreelanceteacher.com, the Freelance Teacher videocast. Some of you are prepping to take the college entrance exams in the near future. I have clients who are taking it this Saturday, actually, and some are coming up later next month. There are things that are vital, I think, that you should think about and know and have prepared for in your journey to take these exams. So if you're going to do these tests, if you're going to take the ACT or the SAT, there are certain things that you should have in mind without a doubt. And I think the three things, again, I'm going to keep this short because let's go about 10 minutes or so, maybe 8. The first thing that you should think about when you're taking these college entrance exams, and I'm particularly thinking about the ACT right now, because it's the standard bearer, as the SAT keeps flip-flopping and changing itself. And they're also now very similar. So let's chat about the ACT. What you should know, first of all, is what's being tested, right? What are they testing you on? What's going to be coming at you? And you should know this before you sit down. You actually should have known this. Your tutor, the first session that you sit together, should tell you, here's what they're testing you on, here's what they sell to the colleges, here's why the exam is taken seriously, and here's what you're going to see when you sit for the ACT. And so that's one of those things where you have basic general knowledge that comes into play. For example, in the English section of the ACT, you have two kinds of questions. You have grammar and mechanics questions, and you have rhetorical skills questions. You should know the difference. You should know that the grammar and mechanics questions are going to harp on commas, semicolons, apostrophes, pronoun usage, putting the verb with the correct subject. What's the verb form, right? Every once in a while, they'll dabble in adverbs and adjectives. They'll do things like that regularly. How often? Well, that's what you practice with your tutor for, and that's the thing that you actually keep your eyes open so you can recognize patterns and see what's going to be looked at the most, what you need to study the most. So grammar and mechanics in terms of the English section, and then in the reading comprehension, what are the 4 styles of passages, right? You should know that there's prose fiction at the beginning and natural science at the end. In the middle, you're going to have social studies or social science, and then humanities. These are things that should be automatic. Not something you think about before you sit down. And then that those questions can be, a lot of those questions in the reading comprehension should be accessed without reading the passage, in my opinion. If they give you the line number or they give you a vocabulary word or a date, you probably don't need to actually look at the passage first. You only have 35 minutes for all 4 passages and 10 questions at the end of every passage. That's 50 seconds a question if you don't read the passage. If you read the passage, of course, you have less time. These are things that are there. What are they testing you on? Well, they go to the colleges and they say, if the student gets this number, mid to low 20s, that student is ready for freshman level college English, basically. And that's ready, right? That's your standard. It's pretty much your baseline, because garden variety schools look for 24 or higher. Most students I work with want to get a 28 or higher on the English and the reading. So these are things you should know. What's being tested? What do the testing services tell the universities? And why do the universities take the exams seriously and use them as a baseline? The second thing that you should look at and remember is that even if you're nervous, even if you get a little panicky, there are clues everywhere. What do I mean by that? In the questions, both the English and the reading, there are clues, right? The English is much more self-explanatory. You have the passage and you have the 4 choices. One of them is always being to keep it the way it is, right? That's a little more cut and dried. The reading comprehension is not so cut and dried at all. It actually can be pretty confusing. So if you have a question where you don't even know where to begin, well, you don't need to panic. This is an intellectual exercise. There are clues in the question and there are clues in the answers. What do I mean? Questions that are these very general, what might be called big picture questions, usually, I'd say 95% of the time, are going to need a big picture answer, right? So if they're talking about the main idea, right? There's a passage on Louis Armstrong in one of these practice packets. If they're asking for the main idea of the passage, the answer that doesn't work is the one that specifically talks about his masterpieces changing certain aspects of music. That's too specific. The main idea of the entire passage wouldn't be something like certain masterpieces of Armstrong's changing music. It's not how this thing works. It's not how the things are written. So you can look for these kinds of clues in the answers, right? Which answer has something specific that would not be a main idea question. So there, and the question, the wording also is one of the key things in, and this comes up in the English and the reading comprehension. They'll ask for something in terms of like an emotion. For example, they'll ask for a word that manages to convey the idea of, let's say, being in a hurry or being afraid, or the idea that the reader should be convinced that the author is correct. That kind of wording is in the question. So you can find these words in the questions themselves, and it gives you just that much of an advantage so that when you look at the 4 answers, you have a much better idea. So that I have students who sometimes get lost and they're nervous and they panic, and that's understandable because you're under pressure. But what you need to then change is your mindset and say, look, there are clues to help me, and I can find them in the question. And if I can't see anything in the question, the answers, maybe there's a pattern in the answers. There'll be something in the answers that will show you the way, that will show you a little bit of material that you can grab onto so that at worst, you can make an educated guess. And lastly, you should have a plan and have practiced it. Even a bad plan is better than no plan, because a bad plan can be corrected. So if you've done a month of prep before one of these exams, you should have practiced, and I do this with my clients. We practice a strategy. It doesn't always work, and the strategy sometimes needs to be changed, but oftentimes it does work. And then what happens is there'll be I've had this with clients all the time. What I recommend as a strategy has to be tweaked because of the client's, the test takers' methodologies and habits before they got to me. But you should have a plan. Again, what do I mean? Well, for example, I've practiced with many students with the reading comprehension, which is very time sensitive. You are pressed for time in the reading comprehension, no two ways about it. To look at the questions, find the 3 to 6 that have either line numbers or dates or proper names or vocabulary and context, and do those questions without reading the passage. Now, that's not natural to a lot of students. You've kind of been trained, for lack of a better word, to read the passage and answer the questions. It feels natural, and it feels natural to me too. But once you practice the strategy a few times, and this is just one of many strategies, you practice the strategy of identifying the questions that have some kind of location in them of some sort. Even a proper name gives you something. Forget about actual line numbers, although those help. Name of a company, the name of a person, the name of a product. If the question has those, or maybe the answers have a list of them, right? These are things you grab onto. You find those, again, 3 to 6 questions, and answer those without reading the passage. Because it doesn't feel natural, you need to practice. You need to take a look at those questions and answer them that way. Every once in a while, what I'll do with a client is I'll give them a passage with 10 questions, and I'll find one of these main idea questions or a difficult question, and I'll ask them, read the blurb at the top of the passage, nothing else, and now answer that question and latch on to every possible clue you can to see if you can answer the question correctly. It doesn't always work, but what it does is it makes the student look at the questions and the answers with laser-like focus to see what's being asked and to see what choices are there for the answer. And when you look at things that closely, you start to see how the exam is worded, you start to see how your plan can be put into action, and you can save time. And that's how you take one of these exams. And I hope this helped. First thing that you do, right, I have my little list here, is you know what's being tested. That's number one. Number two, there are clues everywhere. Find them. And number three is have a strategy and have practiced it at least a month. If you do those three things, at worst, you won't embarrass yourself, right? You'll probably figure out where you need to work, where you need to focus, but you won't embarrass yourself and totally crash and burn, which does happen. All right, this is the Freelance Teacher. I hope these tips came in handy. Good luck on the exam, and I'll talk to you next time.